In Maya, you create curves up here from this window, or you go up to create curve tools. Now if you choose a tool like EP curve tool, in the tool settings you have to pre-select the type of curve that you want to create. Now if I start clicking around, it will create a kind of auto curve. If I want to control the verts for it, I'm going to control vertex, and now I can move all these verts and edit as such. If I want to create a Bezier curve, for example, I have this Bezier curve tool. I hold down my curve and drag. Otherwise, it will create these hard edges. Now, let me just go into one of these orthographic views and create any type of curve by snapping it to a point on the grid. And maybe I make something like this. Maya doesn't have a pipe tool, or doesn't create or doesn't create stuff like Blender and Max does, but you can in a way. So I'll show you a few methods. One of them is just moving your geometry to the base of the curve, going into face mode, for example, selecting the curve with shift and say extrude face. Now the face is extruded to the end of the curve, and if you add divisions, it creates a kind of piping, and this is how you would create cables and so on. This is one method. In this method, the object that you create is dynamic by controlling the verts after, so you can still modify the curve, and whatever you extruded changes after you move the verts around. There is another method where you select the curve, go up here to generate, go up to curve utilities, and say attach brush to curve. Now it creates this stroke, this brush stroke as it considers it, which you modify here in the attribute editor. If you go here to default brush 1, you can affect its scale like this, type in any number. This is its thickness. You can also go here to brush width, and there are a lot of settings here that you can modify. If you want to add more loops, you modify the sample density. And if you want to add more segments, you go here to mesh and say tube section. Now you can see this is the minimum of 3. And for some reason it doesn't go past 12. Even if I write more here. I don't know why, but that's just the way it works. Now this is also dynamic, and you can still modify the curve. So if I choose my curve in the outliner, maybe hide this first, go in, control vertex, move it however I like, and then unhide it again. It still remains dynamic. If I want to turn it into geometry, I go up here to modify, convert, and say paint effects to polygons. Now it's created this mesh. I can just apply a material and I have my mesh, but I can't modify this anymore, but this is still modifiable. So after you've decided how this should look, just convert it. These are two methods. There is also a wrap to curve function. So let's say I create something like this. So maybe it's a braid or a rope or anything. And I've decided I have this. And now I want to put it on this curve. I just select the object, select the curve, go up and say curve warp. Now, I don't know why, but sometimes it just decides to put it next to the curve instead of on the curve, even if the origins are the same and things like that. So Maya is just very random. And we don't know why. You can use the offset to move it up along the curve and so on. The settings are here in the attribute editor as always. While these are applied, of course, you can still edit the object dynamically, let's say, as you would as if it wasn't applied. So that happens. That's about it. Working with curves in Maya, making tubes, pipes, braids, ropes, hair, and so on. Good luck. To work with curves in Max, we just go here to shapes, and these are splines. Now you can choose the type you want to create. I just create a line right now, and if I hold on click, it creates a Bezier curve, and then let go, it will interpolate the next one, and if I just simply click, it creates a polygonal curve, and after I let go, I can modify this with an edit spline modifier, and if I go into sub-object mode and by pressing 1, I can choose the vertices and move them around. Now, as I said, because I hold down, click, this is a Bezier point, and this is a polygonal point, but now I can change the types as well. So if I select and right click, I can change the type in this menu where it says Bezier corner, for example, and now I have these two handles which appeared, and this is Bezier corner, as I mean all of these are Bezier corners now, and I can convert them back to corner, for example, as I had before. And if I choose Bezier, they will turn round because the Bezier one is equal and will always move together whenever you move the handles. And this is a corner now. There are a lot of good options here in the curve menu. So Max has this great toolkit here, and you can even display the numbers now and reorder the curve. So you can revert the spline like this and use the vertex, the segment between two, or the entire spline if you have more of them. In this toolkit you can find things like weld. If there are two of them stacked, like, let me just copy this, and if I shift drag, it extrudes a segment from the available ones. So I have to control shift drag, and I'll move this and snap it on top of the last one, as so. And if I select them both, I can say weld, with this threshold of course in mind. There's also insert. If I want to add another point between a segment, fuse is weld again, and so on. And there's this fillet tool, which is great because you just select the vert and fillets your vert like that. Okay, after you're done, if you click on and say collapse to, it will become an editable spline, or I could have just turned it to an editable spline like this, anytime. And now I have this rendering window. Just a moment, I'll turn this off. And if you enable a viewport, then there are two options here. One is radial, like this, and it creates a tube, and one is rectangular, and it's pretty self-explanatory because here you can just adjust the sizes of it and use this to make cables or vines or whatever you want. It's the best. It's one of the best tools for creating splines, in my opinion. And Blender has a very similar workflow. You have some modifiers for splines as well, and that's about it. If you want to add, for example, I'll just add a circle here. By default, the rendering is turned on now, and if I go here to edit to this editable one, I can attach this and so on. And this is the menu where you just create as many splines and the types you want. And it's very useful. If you want to fit something to a curve in Max, once you have your object and your curve, just select your object, and I'll just show you my topology for it. So let's say this is a kind of rope. I go here and search for path deform under this world space modifier. And now I choose pick path, press the path, move the path so it moves to the starting point, and now I have some options here that will be really helpful, like twist. And I can stretch this towards the end or even further, but then it will just be straight like that. And let me just twist this some more. And this is the position on the curve. And now I'll just introduce a turbo smooth and up the res. And I made a kind of twisty rope. Once you're done, you must collapse to the modifier, because otherwise anything you do will not work. Just like this. So you saw me convert to editable poly. It will not override the path deform binding. So once you're done with this, you must right click on it and collapse to it. And it will turn into this editable mesh, which you will convert again. Otherwise, it will never apply. It will just collapse everything under it, but not this path deform binding modifier. To work with curves in Blender, let's just make some curves. So add Bezier curve. Look at it from the top, go into edit mode, and I can see I have two handles here. To make more, you just press E to extrude, rotate, move, and scale to scale the handle. Like this. You can also select two or more and right click, say subdivide, then you'll have more curves. Of course, there are many handle types. To change a handle type, you select a curve and press V. And let's say this is vector. Actually, I'll select two and say they are vectors, so they'll point at each other. If you grab one of the ends and move them, they'll not be vector anymore, but change into this kind of free curve, free handle type like this, and continue to be half Bezier. There's also automatic, which decides smoothing for itself. Aligned, which is semi-automatic, because it moves on its own if you grab the ends, and so on. Just try these and see the equivalence. And now if I right click and say toggle cyclic, I can close or open the curve. So if I want a closed curve like this, I'll have to say Alt C. Or if I want to open it, I'll say toggle cyclic or Alt C again. Curves also have directions, so if you want to view their direction, you go up here and say tick these normals, and now it has, we can view that, we can see that the curve is going like this. If you want to change the direction, just select any point on it and say switch direction. Now it's pointing the other way. This will or can become important if you use it as a path for animation or a loft or things like that. Now, if I go here and want to create quick pipes, I can go to this geometry tab under the data properties, and it's really good because if I increase this depth here, I can make instant pipes. Let me just hide the direction because it's not useful anymore. If I go into wireframe mode, I can see that it has about 12 segments, and I can adjust that resolution here. So minimum is 4, of course, and keep adding as much as I need. And if I want a custom profile for it, I click this profile window here and drag this and create any profile I want for this tube to have, like this. Now it's 2 rows. And if I say object, I can choose a different curve, let's say a circle. Sorry, I added it to this one. So let me just exit to object mode. And let's say I create a circle. And now I go back to this curve and say object and select the circle. And it's using it as a profile. If I edit this circle, of course, it will modify the profile after it according to the origin point. I can also select this and say fill caps if I need to. Let me just go out of here, and I also have a different kind of geometry. So if I extrude this like this, it will create a kind of ribbon. If I offset it, it will offset it from the curve itself. I can also control a kind of taper with the profile of another object. And let me just go back to the tube. If I have something like this and they are both on, I can create this kind of flat tube, a flat cable, or a kind of square with a round profile. So if I reduce the resolution, this is the minimum. The other resolution is up here. So if you need more resolution in your curve, just add to this number. And that's about it for creating geometry from curves. Of course, let me just delete this and make a new one. I can create any type of curve. So if I have this line, it's like this. It's basically all the curves can become the same. So let's say I have this and I have an object. I can place this object on the curve. by adding the curve modifier, selecting it, and they should always have the same origin point. So I'll just move my object first. Let me just undo, move my object to the cursor. So they have the same origin point now. And after I add it to the line and say deform axis on Z, then I can move it along that axis and it will move along the curve. This is also animatable and pretty useful. Now, if I, let's say, move this here, I can go to the curve, and every point has a thing called a tilt. And if I modify the tilt with Control-T or via this button here in the end panel under item, I can rotate the object like this, or even change the radius scale of the influence of that point. So in the case of geometry like I had before, if I have a tube, let's say I had this, I can go and select these and say tilt, and now rotate the geometry for that tube like this. Just adjust the resolution so it's more influential or it affects it more. And now I can also adjust the radius and make a fatter tube in certain places if I need to, and do a kind of taper. I can always go back and edit these points and remove the values I've inserted.